All right, to continue on what we were working on here, it's got done with data types. Now I'm going to talk about operators. So basically, operators are for comparisons. Um, well, you know what they are. So basically, obviously, plus, if you put a plus on something, you can do addition. So if I say x plus y, there's my result. Okay, really kind of straightforward. There's also concatenation. Basically, it means you can add two strings. So if I have like the word pre, and I have sequel, I can put those together by putting a plus in between them. There's subtraction, multiplication, division, and then modulo. And modulo basically what it does, it gives you the remainder of when you divide things, right? So if I divided 3 by 2, I'd get 1 with a leftover of 1. So it would actually give me the 1 would be the answer for modulo. Postfix operators, basically what it means is that if you add a plus plus to something, it will add 1 to it. So a lot of times you'll have a counter, okay? And what you'll do is on the counter, you'll say like, let's say I have a var, and I'll just call it counter. It shouldn't be capitalized. Var counter. And we'll say it's an int. But what I could do is that when I have I'm trying to keep count of something, I would just do counter and I just do plus plus. This is the same as saying counter is equal to counter plus 1. That's what this is, okay? Okay. And we will not say that. And then minus subtracts 1. So it's a decrement as opposed to increment, okay? Logical operators means these are for comparison. So sometimes you have to do is you'll say, okay, I want to run this bit of code if this is true and this is true. So two ands equal and, or two and symbols equals and. Two straight up thingies, I don't know what those are called, are or, so you have to do 2 of them. And this means not. So I could say run this code if this is not true. So you put this in there and it will do that, okay? Assignment operators, that's what they are. So basically you can put plus equals and it will be the total plus, it's the same as this basically. You can kind of read through those. It's kind of like increment in a way. Comparison operators, same thing as kind of like the logical. You can say something is greater than, something is greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or equal. So this is actually equals, not just one single equal symbol, but 2 of them. And this would be not equals to, okay? All right. So there's a block of code, right? So that's basically, just to go back to the beginning here, this is like one command statement. A variable is a command or a statement, and these are all part of that. Now, if you have a whole chunk of them and you run them as a group that you can call on, that is a function, okay? So that's a block of code. So it's a series of sentences. It's like you can have a whole series of instructions, a bunch of commands, and you hold them into a function. And then whenever you want to do that, you could say function this. So let's say I want to have a function that adds. So I could have function, add numbers. And I can call that function wherever, and I'll send it my numbers, and it will give me the thing that I added. Okay, so basically it's just a way of calling them whenever I want it. It won't run generally by default. There's certain ones that will, but most of the time you're just gonna say, okay, I want to run this, and then it will go okay, and then it will give you back what you want. All right, but that's a function. Basically, it's a block of commands. You can create your own or use built-in ones. So common built-in ones, meaning that like these are already part of Unity, is start, update, fixed update, on trigger. There's other ones as well, but start means that as soon as the code starts, that piece of code's going to run. Like that function always starts. Update runs on every frame, okay? And fixed update runs on every physical frame, based on physics. This actually runs based on visual frames. On trigger events, if an object triggers something, this function will be called. On mouse down, if the mouse is clicked, this function will be called. So these are like built-in ones that already have that kind of stuff built into them. If you make your own, you have to call that function. Like if I want to go function like, awesome sauce, that function is not just going to happen. I'd have to like in my code, so I'm going to go call function awesome sauce, and then it will run. These ones run at specific times, and that's kind of what makes these special, and that's why they're the built-in ones. So the syntax for this, the way you have to write them is that you always write function. You write function first, just like you write var for a variable. The function always has to be capitalized, meaning the first letter is capitalized. That's how you know it's a function. That's why you can't have variable start with an S or a capital letter. You have to put these directly after, 2 parentheses. Basically, these are called parameters. And what parameters are is that if you send it something, like I said, if I was going to do an addition, I would have an addition function, and I wanted to add some numbers, I can call that function, but it's not going to do anything unless I send the numbers I want it to add. So when I call that function, I would send it those, and they would go right inside of these parameters, and then it would use those in order to perform its math. Okay, so those are parameters. And then, but a lot of times, honestly, most of the time, you're just going to keep them blank. You usually don't send them things, but it's just one of those things that this is in there. Brackets, basically, all of the functions or all of the commands that are part of the function go between those brackets. So you remember before I said earlier up here that, when you have a group of them, they go in between. Where is that? They go in between those. This is basically the case. So you do function start, parentheses for your parameters, and then you have your block, and then all of the bits of the statements will go down in a group. Okay, voila. So that's a function. So basically, look at a statement, right? A line of code, basically, as or a command as just one line of code. It says, Jim goes to door, Jim eats breakfast, Jim does this. Each one of those is one command, but a function is the whole group of those. So I could say Jim getting, function, Jim gets ready in the morning, and it could have all of the steps. So whenever I need Jim to get ready in the morning, I would just call function Jim get ready in the morning, and then it would perform that service. Okay, that's basically the idea of it. All right, conditions and loops. Okay, so basically, and I know there's a lot to cover, and it's really boring, and you're going to get more out of doing it than you're going to be out of me discussing it, but I just want to go through, because once you know all this, it's enough that you kind of can get it, okay? So basically, conditions and loops will test for certain conditions and then run a block of code if those conditions are met, okay? So the most basic one that you usually have is an if statement. Basically what you do is you say if, and then inside of parentheses, you have some sort of comparison, or something to ask if it's true. And then if that is true, it runs this bit of code. If that's not true, else, it'll run this bit. So for instance, if I say if the current score is 100, I'll have it put a text that says you win. Else, it'll say you suck. Okay, so basically it says if this in here is true, this is going to happen. So that's what an if statement does. And you can do if, and then the last one be else. You can put a whole bunch of them in there. And basically what it'll do is it'll go down and it will see if this is a true statement, then the next thing comes down. A while loop will do something while this current thing is true. So like for instance, if I say if the score is 100, it's going to run this bit of code and then it's going to mosey on its merry way. But if I do the same thing, so let's say I do while score is not 100, it's going to add to my points, and then it's going to, so let's say we start with the score is 10, right? So it's going to say while score is not 100, so score is currently 10. So I'll be like, okay, well then run the bit of code. It's going to go points 10, because that's what I put for the points, and it's going to go points plus plus. And it's going to go, okay, now points is 11. It's going to come back up here. It's going to say, okay, is the score 11, is that less, not 100? And it's going, yeah. And then it's going to keep adding and adding and adding and adding until it gets to this, and then it's going to carry on its way. So it's going to keep running this bit of code until this statement becomes true. That's basically the idea. All right, a for loop, which is probably the next most popular after the if statement. Basically, you're going to say, for as long as this is true, you're going to do this, okay? So, for as long as it should this. So why did I have this in the same thing? Do this. Okay, this should be up here. This is bad coding by me. Lo siento. So for instance, you're going to say for, and you're going to set up, a lot of times what you do is you set up a, actually not all of it, most of the time, you're going to set up like a counter. We're going to say, so we actually going to declare a variable called I, and usually it's I for like increment. We're going to set up to 0. We're going to say, okay, so for I is starting out with 0, and we're going to say while I is less than 10, and we're going to add 1 to it each time the code runs.
Mommy.
So basically, that was a little weird. Okay, so basically what it's going to do, it's going to say for var int. Okay, so basically it's going to do, okay, so we're going to start off with a variable int, and its value is 0. And we're going to say, okay, that I is 0. Is I less than 10? Yes, it is. So add 1 to it, and then go down the code, right? And we're going to say points equals points minus minus. So subtract 1 from the points. Okay. It's going to come back up here, and it's going to say, now I is obviously 1. Is that less than 10? Yes, it is. Okay, go ahead and add another 1 to it. It's going to become 2. It's going to do this again. It's going to go back up and say, is 2 less than 10? It's going to go, yeah. And it's going to go all the way around until it gets this, is 10 less than 10? It's going to say no, and then it's going to go down and continue, okay? Now, a do while loop is kind of like a while, but it's a little bit different. So basically what it'll do is say do, if the score is equal to this, do this, and then keep doing it until while this is true. So basically, it'll basically test it once, and then it will keep going afterwards, okay? All right, classes. Classes and objects are kind of like the same thing, but basically classes are a collection of statements, conditionals, and functions in one script. Each script you make is basically a class, okay? So the idea, so when we make scripts, those scripts that we're making are classes, and each one should handle one basic mechanic. So you can have a mechanic that controls shooting, a mechanic that controls moving of the character, a mechanic that controls inventory, a mechanic that controls the score, things like that, okay? The way to look at this is that basically classes are factories. And inside that factories, I have a bunch of machines, okay, that can make things for me. And those are my functions. And those machines can basically bring in raw materials, these variables, and utilize those in order to make the things that I want to come out of this factory. Okay, that's basically the best way to kind of look at it. Objects are, which actually should probably go above classes here. I don't know why I ordered them this way. But objects are basically grouped together variables and functions. So in the most basic sense, let me open up Unity to give you kind of an idea. This might make more sense. And I'm actually going to pause. All right, by default, I had this already up. So basically, I opened up Unity, and this is just the last project I work on. So basically, the way to look at this is, let me see if I put this over here. Put this guy over here. When you have objects, these each are objects, okay? Now, each one of these, so let's say I'm just going to make a cube, because that's a little bit easier. So let's create a 3D object, cube, right? I have a cube. He's really small. Come on, get big. There we go. I have this cube, right? Now, this cube itself is an object. This object has certain attributes and also has certain functions that it can do, all right? So what that means is that some of the attributes it has is that it has a position, right? It has this vector 3. It has a position of X, Y, and Z. So it can that's an attribute of it. It has a rotation, it has a scale. Those are attributes that it contains, okay? Now, some things that it can do, where are we here? Some things that it can do is that I can make it set active and not active. I can turn it on and off, okay? I can, it's not in here, but I could move it, okay? I could, make it a trigger, make it not a trigger. I can, make it render or not render. I can do different things to it that it has the ability to do, and I can also add more functions and more attributes to this in order for it to do other things, okay? So those are just things that inherently are in it. Now, what that means is this. Basically, you have two main things that an object has. It has attributes and methods. I said functions. Functions are when you're making things up here, like when you're writing your scripts and